Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing The Moon and the Sun by Vonda N. McIntyre. I'll talk very briefly about the author's background, go into a spoiler-free overview of the plot, talk about what I liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. I listened to this on audiobook, so unfortunately I don't have a cover to share this week. Vonda N. McIntyre was a science fiction author primarily. She passed away a couple years ago, unfortunately, but she, in her time, wrote several books in the Star Trek and Star Wars novelization universes. She also published her own stuff. One of the books that she published was The Moon and the Sun, which won a Nebula Award in 1998, famously beating out George R. R. Martin's Game of Thrones, as well as other books that were published that year in the science fiction fantasy category. She, I believe, won a Nebula Award before that for her other works. So she was fairly regarded in her time. And this book, The Moon and the Sun, was actually adapted into a movie starring Pierce Brosnan, apparently, filmed about 7 years ago, and has not yet been released. But from what I read, the rights have been purchased, and they're looking to release it this year or next year, so there may be a movie adaptation of this book released fairly soon. What it is, it's a little bit of a difficult book to describe, so I'll try. It's, in essence, in the way she describes it in her notes, is a alternative history book, alternative history novel set in the court of Louis XIV in 1693. Louis XIV was the monarch of France, and was known in his time as being one of the most powerful monarchs in the history of Europe, really. So the book he's one of the characters in the book. He's not the main character. The book revolves around really one main character whose name is, I believe it's Marie Joseph. And Marie Joseph is a handmaiden for, I believe it's the king's niece, so the king's brother's daughter. She serves her at court. She comes to court to help serve her. Marie Joseph's brother, is also what's called a natural philosopher. In this book, we would call him today a scientist or an explorer, who has been tasked by the king to capture what is referred to as a sea monster. So the plot of the book is essentially Marie Joseph and her brother, who is able to capture a live sea monster, brings the sea monster back to court, and it's really whether or not the king is going to decide to kill the sea monster and eat its flesh, because there are stories and tales of sea monsters in this world, and if you eat their flesh, you become immortal. So the king, who's now an aged man, is debating whether or not he should eat the flesh of this creature in order to become immortal. And the book is really the relationship between Marie Joseph, the sea monster, her brother, and other people around the court. So there's a lot of moving parts to this book. I did find that the little details that I really enjoyed, everybody reacts to the king as you would think that you would react to someone who has nearly unlimited power. There's several parts in the book where Vonda N. McIntyre is able to show just really the strength and power of the king through really small details. Like there's a part where there is someone who is coming to open a lock in a cage, and the locksmith essentially knows to stop filing when the king is talking, and so you have kind of a funny sequence of events where the locksmith kind of starts and stops depending on whether or not the king is talking. There's also parts where the gardener will come out and prepare flowers at night in the slim chance that the king may be walking by to see the flowers. So the court life at Versailles is really kind of fascinating. I think she does a really good job. It's a very unique story. I think that some of the side characters are kind of fun. There's a child musician and his father who get brought to court. They have some fun moments with Marie Joseph. There's some funny moments in the book. like I said, I think it's a very unique book that I haven't really seen before. Usually when you have alternative histories, I think of things like Harry Turtledove or even Man in the High Castle or Yiddish Policeman's Union that are relatively large events in history, and the people who are there are witnessing major, huge events in history. And while there's some of that in this book, mostly it's surrounding this one character and how she reacts to the king and how she goes about her life. And it feels, to me at least, it felt much smaller and more personal because of those things which I enjoyed. It was kind of a nice departure. Because usually if you're reading like Harry Turtledove, you're reading something like Guns of the South or the World at War. I'm not sure what In the Balance series, that are these huge global sweeping events. And here it's a little less, the stakes are a little less high, which allowed the story to be a little bit more personal. I think if I was going to default the book, it felt, there are times where the plot of the book is a little unclear of what exactly is going to happen. I think the book kind of forms itself as it goes along. There's a romance subplot that didn't quite work for me. I felt like Marie Joseph, I'm not sure how old she is in the book, if she's 14 or 15, but she seemed to be very, very good at many, many things. And I felt that this was more of, it's possible this character could exist in this world, but I felt it was more of the author making a political statement than this character really living and breathing and being this way, which bothered me a little bit. I think that there are, the book ends, the book does have an ending, and I think it made logical sense. I think I wanted a little bit more of explanation of the history and legend and of this creature. And I don't think we get really enough of it to get really invested in the creature and the wider world she comes from. So I thought that was done a little poorly. The book is very, very long. I shouldn't say very long. I listened to an audiobook. It felt a little long to me. I felt that there could have been things that were cut out. I do think there's some really interesting set pieces in there. In the book, there's a scene where all I can say is Marie Joseph's brother is leading an operation, and I thought that scene was actually really fascinating on several different levels. So I did think that there were some nice set pieces in it, but I felt like the characters in the book, some of them could have used a little bit more nuance. There's the Pope comes into the book, and the Pope to me was very one note. Whether or not you think a Pope character would be really, really one note or not, I was a little disappointed by the way she handled that character. The brother of Marie Joseph has kind of an arc that didn't feel 100% earned, in my opinion. So I had some quibbles with the book. I enjoyed the book. I think it was a nice departure from most alternative history novels. And if you're at all interested in courtly life, I think you'd enjoy it. I think the more information you have about the history of this time period in France, the better off you'd be. There are a lot of characters to keep track of at court. I believe most of them are real people. Some of them I think she makes up, but I think most characters are real historical figures. So the more background you have there, the better. As far as who I would not recommend the book to, there's an attempted sexual assault in the book, and so I always want to throw that out there. There's no real severe violence. There are some instances of, today we would call it gaslighting against female characters. So if there's something like that that really angers you or bothers you, you may not enjoy this book because of that. I think that was historically accurate, but I could see how someone could read this book and be upset by some of those things. I think some of the things as far as the gaslighting come from the way that the author handles one of the characters in the book without giving it any spoilers. That could really have been resolved relatively easily if the author wanted to make it, how do I say it? There's a plot convenience, I'll put it that way. There's a plot convenience that the author puts in that I wouldn't call it a hole, but you're like, well, this would circumvent so many issues if this thing wasn't, the way it is. And it just you have to kind of just accept it and say, well, okay, I guess we're going to say that this is the way that it is. But I wish the plot had been a little bit more linear, and I wish that the plot had been a little more clearly laid out in the beginning, because I think for the first half or 3/4 of the book, the plot doesn't really form until the end. There's also, like I said, the romantic subplot that I think felt a little pushed towards the end of the book, that didn't really build as naturally as I wanted it to. But if you're someone who likes alternative history and wants just something different, I think this is be an interesting read. I think she does a good job of capturing the courtly life of these characters. I think she does a good job of capturing the power dynamics between the king and his court and all those things, and there's some fun moments to be had there. So that is The Moon and the Sun by Vonda N. McIntyre. Next time I'm going to be reading Gillian Flynn, Sharp Objects. So until next time, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll have my link to my Twitter account below if you want to check that out. Until next time, bye.